Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Dobbers, Quest for the Key, and is from Splattered Ink Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. You can do so by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Dobbers, Quest for the Key, is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players where you and the other players take control of these mythical creatures known as Dobbers, who are trying to protect their homeland, their forest area, because it is being corrupted by these decaying creatures, led by this evil Shamble Man creature that is about to be released from his magical prison. In order to stop that, you need to get a hold of the magical key that his followers want to use to open up that prison. If you can get to that key, you can save the realm. But of course, this is a competitive game, so what you're trying to do is be the first Dobber to get there and be declared the hero of Dobberton, of the whole realm. Now, how this game actually works, mechanically speaking, is it is a deck-building game. You and the other players are going to be trying to get a bunch of equipment and special items and effects and use those against the creatures and the locations and the challenges that you have out along the realm, along the path to the key, and you can actually place those challenges in front of the other players to impede their progress. So it is deck building, but with a very interesting spatial element as well. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and show you how the game plays with a prototype copy of the game. So do bear in mind that what you see here in this preview version may change in the final version, and that's why you should go to the Kickstarter page to find out more information. But then in any event, once we're done with that, we will come back and discuss it further. Dobbers, Quest for the Key is a competitive deck-building and adventure game for 2 to 4 players. Each player takes control of a Dobber hero from Dobberton, using equipment and items to fight their way through dangerous locations and creatures in order to stop the release of the evil Shamble Man from his prison. The first Dobber to get to the location of the prison's magical key and overcome any challenge that may be there will be the winner of the game. The first thing to mention is that Dobbers is primarily a deck-building game, meaning each player will begin the game with an inferior deck of cards that they will use to purchase better cards. Those cards will be added to their discard pile and, when necessary, reshuffled with the rest of the cards. Therefore, you will eventually draw and be able to use those better cards. Dobbers does, however, add a spatial element to the game that most deck builders do not have. Set up the game by laying out the game board. It's filled with empty locations that can be filled with challenge cards, starting points for the players, and the paths that the players must take to get to the locations. The key location is at the intersection of each player's overall path. Every player chooses a piece and places it at the starting location closest to them. Every player gets a starter deck of 10 cards. These are basic cards that can provide you with the currency points used in the game. Blue action points are used for travel around the board. Red action points are universal and can be used for either travel or overcoming challenges, and bottle cap points are influenced, used to purchase cards. There are also orange points that you can get from other cards later on that can only be used for challenges. At the start of the game, each player shuffles their deck. The randomly chosen starter player will begin with 3 cards drawn from the deck, the second player will begin with 4 cards, and the third and fourth player will draw 5 cards, which will be the normal amount for all players to draw each round going forward. You also choose or are randomly dealt a hero card that stays on the table in front of you. Heroes provide a constant bonus of 1 universal action point and 1 influence point to spend each round, as well as a special ability that usually involves giving a further bonus during certain actions. A deck of location cards are shuffled, art side up, and placed near the game board. 2 cards are taken from the top of the deck and placed in a row next to it. Similarly, a deck of creature cards are shuffled in the same way, with 2 cards also forming a row right next to the location cards. Together, all of these cards are called the challenge row. Location cards can be acquired and placed on the board in the location spots along the paths of competing players, in order to impede their progress. The number in the top left corner is the amount of influence required to acquire the card and place it. You may not look at or reveal the other side of the card until a player encounters it on the board. On the right side of the revealed location is the number of action points necessary for a player to overcome the challenge, and a smaller number that is required instead if you have the right item type, either navigation, travel, protection, or combat. The rest of the card will tell you what happens if you successfully defeat the cards, or if you are defeated trying to get past it. You may receive bonuses, or penalties. Each location can hold a certain number of creature cards, which can be acquired just like locations and placed underneath locations that are already on the board. When you encounter a location, you must also deal with these creatures in the same manner. You may even equip the creatures with cards from your own deck just to make things that much more difficult for your opponents. Any player can take these creature and equipment actions even if they weren't the one to place the original location. Below the challenge row is the adventure row. Shuffle the deck of adventure cards and lay out 6 cards face up. Adventure cards can be purchased and added to players' discard piles to use later. After a purchase, a new card is drawn from the deck and added to the line immediately. There are 4 types of adventure cards: weapon, armor, item, all of which is called equipment cards collectively, and effect cards. Equipment, when later drawn, can be attached permanently to your hero with a limit of 1 of each weapon, armor, and item, though you can replace them later. These will increase the action points and influence that you can use each round, as well as give you special effects, some of which can only be activated if you've already played a card of a certain class, either Dobberton, Wild, Ratclaw Clan, or Decay. Also, equipment, when purchased, can immediately be added to a creature already in play at a location. There's no need to put it into your deck if you don't want to. Effect cards, on the other hand, are immediately used and discarded. Finally, make a stock of modifier tokens near the board. These will add or subtract to a player's total as they earn bonuses or penalties from challenges. Then the game begins. In order, each player will take a turn consisting of a main phase and a draw phase. The main phase is where all the action happens. You play cards from your hand and utilize your equipment and hero ability to purchase adventure cards, or to move locations and creatures to the board, and to travel across the map. To travel, you look at the blue shield value on the board on the route that you want to move. If you have enough blue travel points or universal points mixed with your travel points, you can move from your current spot to the next spot along the way. If it's a large location spot and it contains a challenge card, you must reveal it and face it. A defeated location remains in place, and if you ever backtrack, you'll have to deal with it again. However, creatures are immediately discarded after being defeated, and if there was equipment attached to them, you may either destroy it or add it to your own discard pile to use later. At the end of your turn, when you can no longer play any more cards or no longer want to, all of your used or acquired cards go into your discard pile, any cards that you still had in hand are discarded, and 5 new cards are drawn from the deck. If you ever need more cards, you must shuffle your discard pile and make a new deck, then keep drawing until you don't have to draw anymore. Rounds of the game will continue like this until one player makes it to the key space. If it's empty, that player immediately wins the game. If instead there is a challenge there, it must be overcome first. If the player fails in doing this, another player who catches up may be able to do it first. Alternatively, you can have a duel to end the game. When a player reaches the last key space, every other player has one more turn to reach that space as well. If there does end up being more than one player in the final space, then all of those players will play as many cards as they can to acquire as many universal and challenge points as possible, travel points don't count, to see whoever has the most and is therefore the winner of the game. That is Dobbers' Quest for the Key. Well, if there's one genre that I'm very familiar with above all other board game and card game genres, it's deck building games. It's been a favorite of mine, and once you've seen one, you start to see very similar elements show up in them over and over again. I mean, there are some deck building games that are just carbon copies of other deck building games. There's not a whole lot to them. There's a deck of cards, everyone gets some cards, and that's it. What makes Dobbers' Quest for the Key so interesting is that, yes, there is that core element there of deck building, although even that is done in a very interesting way because it has a heavy emphasis on equipping your characters as if you were in an adventure RPG game. So that's a little bit different, but while you have that core concept, you also have this big board spatial element where you actually have to have travel points to move along the different paths. Now, when you get to those larger locations, you have to have challenges with locations and with creatures that may be there and that may even be equipped by your opponents. And that's another interesting element as well. Since this isn't cooperative and it's competitive, you're throwing those in front of the other players in order to make them deal with them. And if you're not careful, depending on what paths you choose to go down, it might be easier for you to go into that challenge as well that you yourself play, so that can be kind of rare. But regardless, the point is, it's a very interesting thing that you have this deck building that sort of fuels the game, but it's in service of so many other interesting things that are going on. I mean, the mere fact of how you have the standard row of cards that you can purchase, the adventure cards, and like I said, even that's unique because you have so many different types of cards and the equipment cards and how that works. And there's tons of variability in how you can equip your character and how you choose to play, along with your hero special ability. But then you have a whole separate row, the challenge row, where you can decide, okay, I could get a card from the adventure row and use it to make myself more powerful, but I do have enough influence points. I can go ahead and put this challenge card out there and really mess with my opponents. And then put a creature on top of that location to really double down. So there's this give and take of like, how much do I want to invest in cards for myself? How much do I want to invest in cards just to mess with the other players? And, what's the give and take there? If you just rely on buying cards from the adventure row, it's not really going to work for you because the other players will try to trip you up. And while you may be powerful, everyone else has a clear shot to get to the key. So you have to sort of pick and choose what you do and when you do it. Going all one route is not going to win the game for you. So that's a very interesting element there. And just the fact that there's, again, variability. So many different adventure cards, so many different location cards and creature cards. So you can have rat men at the castle walls, but then you could have the tree golems in the field. There's just so many different combinations that you can have, on top of the fact that you can equip the equipment cards to them as well. So it really feels like there's never going to be a game of Dobbers that is exactly the same as the game that came before it, and it really leaves a wide open field for them to add expansion content in the future and to change things up even more in typical deck building fashion. But again, there's so much more to the game than just that deck building. Then you add on to that the theme as well, which is a light, family-friendly theme with high-quality artwork, but there are little story element bits as well. It's not just the artwork. When you add all these different things together, it really comes out as a very appealing package that can appeal to a lot of people. And really, while it is, I would say, heavy in some regards and very strategic, it's not an overwhelmingly heavy or strategic game, meaning casual gamers can jump into it, especially if they like that theme as well. So if any of this appeals to you, the theme, the deck building, the cool board element, how accessible it is to people, but how also hardcore gamers can get into the strategy of it, if any of that appeals to you or someone you know in your game group, don't take my word for any of this. Go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out more information for yourself. You can do that by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. That is Dobbers, Quest for the Key from Splatterling Games. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors. Take care.